Namaskar to everybody. It is an absolute delight to be in IIT Delhi today and speaking to you. First, thanks to Ram Gupta ji who has made this possible. He was pursuing consistently to see which date would be convenient for both Parthoda and me. And of course, it's lovely to have Parthoda himself in the audience. I've always seen you on a screen, and now I'm trying to adjust that you're here in flesh and blood in front of me. So it's wonderful to speak after you. So again, thank you everyone for stopping whatever you were doing and coming here to listen to us. So I'll just, because I have a lot of slides, so I might move a little fast. I'm a kind of a PowerPoint person. I hope you don't mind, because I have a lot of data to share. And I personally prefer PowerPoints when I want to remember something. Not everybody can inspire as well as you. So maybe, these slides will do the work for me. So I'm going to be speaking to you about a time when India was the educational capital of the world, which is something very hard to imagine today, because we are all fleeing to America, we are fleeing to countries around the world, US, Europe, wherever we can get out of India to get our education. So I want us to rewind and go back to a time when it was exactly the opposite, just the opposite. The whole world was coming to study in India. And I think we need to reflect on that period, because then we'll know what we were doing right. What is it that we were doing so excellently that everybody wanted to study in India? So this is the period that is going to be the fulcrum of my whole talk, because there was something we were really doing right at that time. Now, and I'll also tell you why it matters today, okay? So let's just start with some basic facts. We have a very ancient tradition of formal disciplined teaching, not some random teaching. Anyone teaches whatever he or she likes. Very disciplined teaching, and it attracted students from around the world. And it was a society where parents would push their children to study in the top universities, in the best gurukulas and mathas. That was the culture of the time, and that might explain to you why even today your parents are pushing you to get the top grades. It's not something that happened yesterday or 100 years ago. It has been happening for thousands of years. Parents have been pushing their children to go and get into Nalanda, get into Vikramshila, get into Tiruvannamalai, get into Sringeri, whatever. I mean, it was always that, are you aiming for the best institution in this land? And it doesn't matter whether you have to travel thousands of miles for that. That was the culture. And even before we had those brick and mortar buildings, we had forest universities. So imagine that we don't even need a building for a university. So we are in the midst of a forest, and under one tree there is one guru teaching one discipline, and then there's another tree a little away where there's another guru surrounded by students teaching another discipline. And this is a university because there is a vice chancellor. There is a kulapati who is taking care of all the different departments to see that it is all in alignment. And that was actually probably the beginning of the universities that we had. And now when the Western world says, okay, which is the first university, they go back to, okay, where did we have those buildings, and then we had certificates that were given, and that is the first university. So they placed that in somewhere in Europe, basically, Spain. But actually, I make the case that our universities were way, way older than that, because they were doing all the things that modern universities do today. And it's interesting that it is codified into our culture. We had rites of passage, the ceremonies which mark the entry from one stage of education into another. So we had something called Vidyarambha, which in Bengali is called Hate Khodi. The first time that a child learns how to write, it's celebrated. Now imagine, if only it's so embedded in the culture, it's part of the culture, that it's now in the ceremony itself. So different people are invited to see this ceremony where the child is going to write the alphabet for the first time, and it is something to celebrate, both girls and boys. Vidyarambha, Hate Khodi, whatever you call it. I don't know how many of you had your Vidyarambha when you were babies. This is a sign that we are getting deracinated. Then Upanayana ceremony. This is when their children got into higher education. And please don't make the mistake of thinking this is a Brahminical ceremony, only Brahmins did it. In my research, I'm finding that practically every profession had its own Upanayana. So whether it's a carpenter, it's a musician, it's a doctor, they had their own Upanayana. Not necessarily sacred thread has to be put. It is tying around the wrist. It is chanting something, and tilak is put by the guru to the student, and again a whole lot of celebrations where people will come and celebrate that this child is now going to start a new life under a guru. Okay? Also skills, any academic discipline had an Upanayana. Now just take a look at this picture, which is also in my book. If you may not be able to see the names very clearly, but when I started mapping the different centers of education, higher education, not basic education, higher education, I was amazed that they were all over India. It was not just Nalanda or one Takshashila, all over India. And ultimately I stopped at this, but I know there are many more because we are also excavating more. For example, near Nalanda there is a place called Telhara, which was only excavated in 2009. Because it was mentioned in various texts, so the archaeologists started looking for it, and they found that Telhara University is even bigger than Nalanda, and had even more disciplines that were taught over there, right? So we had various models of educational centers. So there would be universities, there would be temples which are serving as temple universities, there will be mathas. Mathas are another very interesting institution. If you get my book, please read about how they were not just places where students went to study, they were also places where travelers could stay. And so travelers are staying there, classes are going on, sometimes the travelers will also join the class, imagine. So it's very open, there are no boundaries, and there were also places where Vaidyas were sitting there in those mathas where classes are going on. There's also a doctor available if anybody falls sick, a traveler falls sick. The traveler can go in. So it's very, very different models of education were there, and one could decide where they want to go. And it is surprising to me that even in those times when it used to take a month to reach from point A to point B, people are traveling from south of India to north of India, from north to south, east to west. I'm losing track of the number of migrations that happened for the sake of education. So also to teach. So for example, my own ancestors moved from I always thought I'm from Karnataka, so I'm from Karnataka. I'm married to a Singh, that's why I have this Singh as a surname. But my ancestors apparently moved from Ahitchhatra, which is near Bareilly in Uttar Pradesh, in the 4th century, Common Era, because there was a Raja Mayur Varma in Karnataka who wanted the best scholars to come from that Ahitchhatra University to come and spread knowledge in Karnataka. So he kept calling first 100 families, then 600 families, and it went on and on. I am from a group of 60 families. We were called Arvatoklu. Arvatoklu means 60 families. And they were grammarians, there were Vedanta experts, there were Ganita experts, all kinds of experts, Vyakaran experts. And they came and settled, and then they spread knowledge, and then that's how then their students carried it on. So when we speak of Vivekananda, for example, I revere him of course a lot, but what I revere even more is the Guru Shishya Parampara. How he went and sat at the feet of a Guru, imbibed it from him, and then he continued further on a bigger scale. Because the same one-on-one teaching would have taken a long time to spread the education, but he made sure that he took it to scale, right? And if you read those stories of interaction between Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, they are hugely inspiring, and they teach you what that Guru Shishya Parampara is about. How by just being with the Guru, the student is observing, learning, and imbibing. And not everything has to be a question and answer. It can simply be that you have a question and the Guru already is manifesting the answer to you. You don't even have to ask the questions. So basically this map tells me about how students traveled from different places to study. And in the south, for example, I love to mention this, there was a university which a lot of students came from the north because it was called the Nalanda of the south. It is there in the south, and it even had martial arts. So it was not just they're teaching Vedanta, so there were martial arts going on. So there were rules about how if you've finished your martial arts class, you have to leave all your weapons on one side of the class and then go to the next class. You can't carry your weapons to the class, otherwise it might lead to some fights between students. And you'll find inscriptions in so many parts of India which shows that it is so institutionalized education. How much scholarship is to be given to each student, how much allowance is to be given to the teachers. The higher the subject, the more difficult the subject, the more the allowance. You will find these inscriptions in Tamil Nadu. It's very well maintained over there. For some reason in North India, of course we know the reasons why we don't find a lot of these universities, right? The role of the teacher. Now today we say that teachers are not getting respect, they are the least paid. The people who did the worst in the class ultimately go on to become teachers. Now imagine a time when it was the opposite. The best students in the class went on to become teachers. In fact, every student is being trained to be a teacher. That was the culture. You can't just be a student, you have to be teaching the next generation. That's a responsibility you hold, right? So that was the thinking. And the whole society used to support the the students and the teachers. So the scholars did not have to worry who is going to give me food, where will I live. So there was no tension. The only tension they had was, will I stay the course? Will I study and spend my time on learning this? Will I memorize this? Will I explain this well? Those were the things. So they only focused on research and on studies. Okay? And the whole society, and who was in the society? There were artisans. The so-called division of society we talk about today, that the Shudras are being exploited. Okay, there were plenty of cases of that. But the actual society that we see when we go back and read about the accounts is that different categories of people, different the classes of people, all have respect for the student and the teacher, and they think it's their responsibility to support them. So if a student is not having a house to live in or doesn't have food to eat, it's a shame on the whole society. That was the thinking in those times. Okay? And the Guru-Shishya relationship, where the Guru was like a walking, talking book. That's very interesting. So that is the reason why the student would live with the Guru. Because by living with the Guru, you would observe how the Guru conducts himself from morning to night. And also, the Guru will be in a mood to teach you something. If you are around him all the time, you're serving him, you're giving him water to drink, you're washing his clothes, then suddenly the Guru will start telling you something that is coming from his heart. That, you know this? And that is the reason the students would try to stick to the Guru for as long as they could, because they didn't want to miss those gems of instruction. And you will see that in the story of Vivekananda and Ramakrishna also. In fact, you will see, if you go and read the stories of the famous Shishyas, you will find that they have stuck around with the Guru for the maximum time. Like if the Guru is awake at 2 a.m. in the night, they'll also get up at 2 a.m. and just be with him. Then he'll start teaching them something. So there have been classes at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever. When the Guru wants to teach, students would just shake off their slumber and be with the Guru and learn. Okay? I have a whole chapter on the Guru Shishya, the nuances of the relationship, which is very beautiful. Now there was a distinction between lower education and higher education, which doesn't mean like today, kindergarten and higher education. What it really meant is, lower education was to do with the skills, where you're just getting good at doing something. You keep doing it day after day, so you're very good at that skill. Worldly education, skill-based education, 90% of the students used to have that kind of training. Not everybody wants to go and study Vedanta. There is some kind of an illusion created where we think that, a lot of people wanted to study Vedanta and go, and the Brahmins used to drive them away, and they were ruling over the whole of India. It's such a nonsensical picture that I can't explain it to you as much as what you would find in these books. So what we find in the books where you see the accounts is that they were hardly, the percentage of teachers who are teaching Vedanta were probably 5% in society. Most people, just like you today, want a livelihood. So they would all go and learn some skill where they are definitely influenced by Vedanta. All the teachers who are teaching any skill are influenced by Vedanta because they know the principles of the Vedanta. Through the Itihasa, the Puranas, the stories that are told, they know those principles. It's not like everybody is studying the Gita, but they know what is in the Gita because it is being used as conversation. When the wandering guru would come to the village, sit under a tree, people would want to listen to the pravachan, and he would talk about the Gita, Upanishad and things like that. So they know what's in it. It's not that they have to know every line of it. So that's how skill-based education was also influenced by all the Vedic concepts. But there was an understanding that it is lower education because it's not about self-awareness. Ultimately, what everybody has to go towards is higher self-awareness, and that is higher education. So now there were some who want to go totally into higher education, which means they want to learn about, the questions about who am I, where have I come from, what happens after death. Those are the deep questions that some of them really want to ponder, and they are very clear that they want to do that. They would go into Vedic education. And there were a lot of strict rules for that, and then there will be very, very difficult entrance examinations, which were probably even more difficult than your IIT entrance examinations, because in Nalanda, for example, only 20% students were selected. 80% were rejected in the admission test, and they also had coaching centers, would you believe it? They also had coaching centers, and I came to know Indonesia was one of the big coaching centers. If you want to get into an Indian university, go to Indonesia, because a lot of Chinese ships would go there, and then Yi Jing talks about how he learned Sanskrit, he learned a lot of subjects in Indonesia before he applied to Nalanda. So higher education versus lower education, just be conscious that, higher education would be when you go to a philosophical level, when you're talking about a higher state of consciousness. So eventually, like you've been an engineer for many, many years, then when you start asking the higher questions and you want to know about the engineering of the mind, engineering of the universe itself, then you're going towards higher education. So it was very different. So lower and higher was not in a demeaning way, but in the way you're using your mind. Now I'll quickly talk about 4 main attributes of ancient Indian education. This is not restricted to 4, actually there are hundreds, but I just picked these 4 because they could be relevant to today's pedagogy. Maybe we could use it today, right? That's why we are talking about relevance to today. First is that it was very nature-centric, okay? Second, it was interdisciplinary, very, very interdisciplinary. People did not study in silos. Third, holistic. And fourth, purposeful, not arbitrary, not random. So I'll give you some examples of that. Nature. So classes were held in the midst of nature. That was a given. It wouldn't be in these like 4 walls like this where you can't see a single tree, you can't see the sky. It wasn't like that. You always were in the midst of nature. And nature was herself a teacher. So, you know, you would be right there when the season has changed, when you are getting a different fragrance in the air, you are seeing the different plants growing. So you are in the midst of nature. Nature is teaching you and you are in the midst of nature. So you would reach higher truths by observations. So many times the guru would just send the student, go and graze these cows and come back in the evening. And you will be surprised to know how many lessons those children learned simply by going and grazing the cows and coming. Or go and get water from the well. So there are lots of these stories in Upanishads where, you know, you will hear about what the students learned from nature. Germination of a seed, you know, and also the herbal, what medicines are good for us to cure us of diseases. And the other interesting thing is that there was no spoon feeding. The culture was that actually you can't sit in front of a guru and start interrogating him. Tell me the answer of this, tell me this, tell me. It wasn't like that. And in fact, there are some beautiful stories where 6 students go and want to learn from Pippalada, who is a rishi, and they have a whole lot of questions. And he very gently says, why don't you stay here for an year or so, and the very questions that you're asking will be answered when you live with me. And he doesn't answer those questions. And then at the end of that period where they stayed, he said, you have those questions? They said, no, we don't have the questions, we found the answers. So you see, this is beautiful because when somebody just gives you an answer, you're actually going to forget it. But when you derive it yourself, when you work hard to reach that answer, it's going to stay in your mind forever. I am suspecting that's the reason that we were not always giving straight answers. Of course, sometimes you have to, but the bigger truths were required to be pondered upon. Let me just go a little faster. Here is an example of a story from Chandogya Upanishad, just to give you a glimpse. So there is this student Shvetaketu who is asking his father, who is his guru. He is saying, I do not see anything inside the seeds of this tree, because the teacher has told him, go and look into the seeds and see what you find. And he is saying, I'm not finding anything inside this. So he is telling him, in that invisibility exists the tree, but the tree emerges from the seed and manifests only when it is pushed out by the subtle energy that you cannot see. And it is the same subtle energy that is in all the living beings. Just imagine that he is telling him that inside the seed is the tree, but you can't see it right now. It's there, but it's going to come out when the right time comes, and then it will become a tree. So now the student will probably start thinking about what is inside me, which is yet to be manifested, right? So these are the questions that used to be given through nature for the students to ponder upon. Interdisciplinary, the second attribute that I mentioned. This is a quote that I picked up from Charaka Samhita, where it says, a physician who has learned one science only cannot be sure of his own science, which is Ayurveda. And for this reason, the physician has to be versed in many sciences. Here is a clue that, you know, students are being told, don't just focus on your discipline. Make sure you also know a little bit about other disciplines, because you will then get ideas from there and you'll find the relevance. You'll bring something to your discipline because you know those other disciplines, okay? And that is how it was in our educational system. Multi-dimensional or holistic, there were no boundaries, no artificial barriers between math, art and religion. Like today it is, which has come from the West, where they needed to make those boundaries because the religious people were opposing discoveries in math and physics and things like that. We know about Galileo's story, right? Because he's saying the earth is going around the sun and he was put under house arrest. These things did not happen in India because the Purohitas themselves are well versed in astronomy, And if you want to know better about science, you have to go and ask a priest. So because we didn't have those boundaries, right? Now the sun could be worshipped as a divine being, which is like the Adhidaiva aspect. Adhidaiva aspect is the Devata aspect of something. So you are worshipping it as a divine being, the sun. But then that doesn't stop you from calculating the distance between the sun and earth and doing other scientific calculations with the sun, treating it like a normal entity, right, a material entity, which is called the Adhi-Bhautika aspect. And then you could also then think about yourself, the sun within you, the light within you, and so that is the Adhyatma aspect, the power of Surya Devata, how you can awaken it within you. So in this manner, everything could be studied in 3 ways, and there were no real boundaries between art and science and math and various other disciplines. That's why they were polymaths, by the way. It was very, very common in those times that a person was very well versed in science, very well versed in arts, poetry. Amazing. The level that they reached in intellect is something that we have not equal today, I would claim. Even the smartest person, when I look at them, I feel that they're very unidimensional compared to what our ancestors were. I know I'm making a little bit of a sweeping statement, but I can back it up if you come to me. Blending the sacred and the rational. So here is a picture of a yagya that I attended recently, and there were geometrical shapes, and these are coming from thousands of years. And these are not just random shapes. There were actually a lot of geometry, trigonometry, so many things are used because the areas have to be of a certain magnitude. So the area of something has to be equal to the area of the sum of something to other entities. So it was a lot of math involved in creating the altars and the yantras for various worships, various yagyas, right? So this is, as I contrasted again with Europe, where we had those divisions between religion and science and math. We didn't have it because it was part of the way we lived. We were using math in our everyday puja also, right? And there's more that you'll find in my book on this. 4th one, purposeful, not arbitrary. And the example that I've picked is about the arrangement of the alphabet. So, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G in English, which is just random arrangement of the letters of the alphabet. You don't know why C comes after B, D comes after C. Random. But look at how it is arranged in Sanskrit and all the Indian languages, right? So, it's according to where the sound is articulated from. So, ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. When you say it, you can see it. It's coming from the kanthya. It's called kanthya. It is coming from the lower portion of your voice tube. Then, cha, cha, ja, jha, nya is coming a little bit higher. It's called talavya. Then you have ta, tha, da, dha, na, which is even higher. Palate is being hit. Then you have ta, tha, da, dha, na, where you're using your teeth, dantya. You can't say these letters without using your teeth. Then pa, pa, ba, pa, ma, all using the lips. So this is how, imagine that the letters of the alphabet are themselves arranged so scientifically, and you will find this trend in almost everything you study. And that's why, and that will make you think about how logical are you today. So this is something that's quite relevant. I went into look at the tools of pedagogy that were being used in ancient times, and I picked 4 of these which are very interesting: games, stories, memory training, logic and debate. Okay, and there are many, many more. I lost track of how many more there are. Games are interesting because, in ancient times, even games were educational. So today we have this game called Saap CD or Snakes and Ladders that you all know, right? Everybody knows. In that you just move the dice, you move to whatever number you get, and if there's a ladder, you go up. If there's a snake, you come down, right? But in ancient times, they were teaching moral values through this game. So every square had a vice or a virtue. So there will be something like ahankara, arrogance in one square. If you land on that, then you'll come down a snake to a lower number. And if there is something like ahimsa, then you will go up to a higher square. So, by playing these games, the children already knew that, okay, this is a bad attribute, this is a good attribute. So now the parents didn't have to lecture to them that, oh, you have to be like this, you have to be like that, because they know that it's already there in their consciousness, okay? This is just one example. We had chess. Chess originated in India, and I was fuming when the international media was saying when Gukesh won the topper with the chess championship, and they were saying, oh, so Indians have finally woken up to chess. They're finally realizing, they've seen the value of chess. And I was like, what? You don't know that chess originated in India? So this is the problem we have. We have got so deracinated that we don't even know that chess was invented in India, refined in India. It was understood as a game that all the members of the royal family should know. Because one day you might be ruling, and if you don't know strategy, then you are going to be a failure. And the strategy used to be taught through texts. Of course, there were shastras to teach them, but there were games also that taught them, and so that they would learn it in a playful way. Cards were also invented in India. Playing cards, tash, also came from India. So let's go into, so there's this slide that I forgot. So we had many other interesting games, like, reciting tongue twisters. In those days when there are no phones, nothing, and maybe electricity, there's no electricity, they're still playing these games orally, which was actually sharpening their mind. There was this game of completing an incomplete poem or stanza. Then even this Antakshari that we all play today, do you know how ancient it is? It's coming from thousands of years. So in those days, there were no film songs, of course, but you just chant some shloka or any poem that you know, and from the last letter, the next person has to chant another shloka or a prayer or sing a song with that letter. So this is how they would play that game as well. Then there were games where you have to, you'll be given a word and you have to compose a poem on the spot. You have to compose poetry on the spot with that word. So there were lots of challenging games which were used to keep the mind active and very creative. Some of these games today, these are considered as very difficult. I don't know if you've heard of a term called avadhana. Anyone here has heard of avadhana? I really want you to look up avadhana. Avadhana is just an amazing display of memory. Today it has become a display because of very few people are going into it. But that was a kind of training given to students where they have to be able to focus completely, and they'll be given like 20 or 100 questions in a row. So like all of you will be asking me one question and I won't answer you right away. One question, second question, third question, all these people, they'll all be in my head, and then I'll start answering in the same order. So the first person who asks a question, I'll answer after I've heard all the other questions. And some of those questions would be like, compose a poem on this word. Or, who is the king of this place? It could be any kind of question. And the person who specialized in avadhana had to be able to answer that. So imagine the mind-boggling kind of learning that they had. Let me now go to the next one. Stories. Stories were used as a very, very important pedagogical tool. So we saw Upanishad, how stories were being used to teach. Apart from that, we had very interesting stories. We had all these Vikram Vetal, Tenali Rama, those funny stories which were teaching you a lot without lecturing. But there were also stories which were extremely funny, in which there is a person who bungles up every time. And I find that in every culture in India, every language. So there is one set of students or one guy who is going to bungle up. Whatever job is given to him or her, he will bungle it up. And you will not even know how he's going to bungle it up, because that is the suspense, that he's been given very clear instructions, but he's going to mess it up. And everybody would laugh. But in this way, something was being taught, like how you make mistakes, basically. What I saw in these stories is how we all make mistakes is being taught through those stories. So stories have been used a lot in teaching, in molding the characters of the students, and even teaching mathematical concepts, because Leelavati and those other mathematical texts are also in story form. The problem itself is a story, and there's this thing happening, and now give me the answer to this. And then you have to give the answer to that. Memory training. So memory training, I already mentioned avadhana to you, which is part of the memory training. But recently a study was done called the Sanskrit effect, in which they studied the brains of these pandits who are chanting by memory the Vedic verses. And they found that the cognitive area of the brain had expanded because of this chanting of Sanskrit shlokas. So here is something we need to, today we vilify rote learning, because the way it has been done after the British came is that just mindless learning. But we had a method to it. The way things were memorized, it was actually helping us to expand our brain. So I think we need to look at memorization again, because we have outsourced everything to hard disks and Google and everything, and we tend to not remember anything. Maybe not even just our phone number is all we remember. But in those ancient times, entire books used to be in the memory of the students, and it wasn't something very hard. So the entire Ashtadhyayi will be in the mind of a student who's learning grammar. So 2-3 such books will be fully, and so all they have to do is, it used to help them in communication also, because as they are speaking, they remember and they can just communicate that, whatever they want to say from the book, verbatim, they can repeat it. So I think, we have deteriorated also in terms of memory, because if somebody teaches us something, and then at the end of the class we are asked, what did you learn? We'll just remember one or two things. But in those times, they could remember the whole class completely. They could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the 10, 20 points that were made in the class. And this is because there was a way to memorization that was being taught. And I think today's modern students should explore that with the Vedic learning, and see if there's something they can pick from there. And here, I just wanted to give you a glimpse of how the Vedas were memorized. There were so many ways, 11 different ways of memorizing the Veda. So the first way was, like I've put A, B, C, D, E, F. A is actually one word in the, one pada in the Rig Veda or any other Veda. And B is the next one, C is the next one. So you could learn the Samhita Patha, which is just A, B, C, D, E, F. Or you could have a pause after each of that, A, B, C, D. So this was one set of memorization. The next memorization was Krama Patha, where it will be A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E. They would proceed to memorize like that. Then it gets more and more complex. It will become A, B, B, A, B, then B, C, C, B, B, C, C, D, C, C, D. As it goes on, so by the time they come to the, the 8th year of the Veda learning, they will have become Ganapatis, where they remember it so well, they can recite it in so many different ways, right? And this is the kind of memory, this used to help them to have gigantic memories. And this has been noticed by the British travelers and various other travelers who came to India. And they said, how is it that the Indians have such good memories? And they didn't know, but it was part of our education system, okay? Logic and debate. Now this is something which is very apparent to you if you see why we have so many sampradayas. Why are we all not Advaita followers? Like I am from the Dvaita Sampradaya, and there are others I know. So Sampradaya is a group, is a category of Vedanta, or any, of the Hindu way of Hindu philosophy, okay? And there are so many of them because there used to be disagreements. So there is one guru who comes up with a certain philosophy, certain theory, and that person would be opposed by somebody else, and then there would be huge debates. So that would be called Shastrartha. Do people heard of Shastrartha over here? Please, a show of hands. Shastrartha. Shastrartha were the debates that were held in ancient times between two scholars, two intellectuals. And those were the tournaments that we had, not the gladiator tournaments where people want to watch who is killing who and all that stuff. The tournaments that really mattered in India were the Shastrartha, which the kings would organize. The kings themselves would organize these huge debate tournaments to which people like you would come, and you would listen to both sides of the debate and then see whom you want to support. So that's what it was. Yes, Kalidasa also was there. That was of course a little bit of a mockery of a debate, that one, but they were serious debates. I mean, where you could not just go to debate somebody randomly. You had to completely prepare yourself on your opponent's point of view. And you should be able to argue like your opponent from the opponent's point of view before you go and take on the opponent. That was the level of debate. So if you see the news hour debates on the TV channels today, our ancients would just scoff at them because they'll say, what the hell is this? Both are shouting at each other and nothing is being discussed, right? That's not how it was. It was Vada. So there would be one point of view put across, then the other guy already knows what that point of view is because he's read the books written by this person. Then he counters it one by one, and I'm saying he, but it could also be she. We have had a lot of debates between women as well, okay? Gargi and all those famous female scholars also became famous because they took part in debates and put forward very hard arguments which could not be countered. Eventually, sorry? Shankaracharya and Mandana Mishra's debate was adjudicated by a female, by a lady, right? Ubhaya Bharati. So that shows to you that there were women who were highly educated. So that's about debate and logic. Logic was very well developed, but for some reason the logic schools, the Nyaya school, Nyaya was the school of logic, they went into decline as we got colonized, and the kind of vigor which was there in that school, in debate went down. And then we got into all these today's debates, what you see, which are meaningless debates where you don't even know what has been agreed upon. That is what we have degenerated to. So I would invite all of you, after all this is an IKS gathering, please go and look into the Nyaya Shastra, the science of debate, the science of logic of ancient India, which I think is already being taught also in a modern sense in some schools, but this needs to be brought back in a big way for all of us to become more logical. I think I'm going to skip this, I'm taking too long. The point that I want to make is that Indian scholars, Indian gurus have left their imprint on so many disciplines that practically I feel like anything that we are studying in universities today, if you go back to the history of it, you'll find that it leads back to India. You know, Kannada, Sushruta, Charaka, Aryabhatta, Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, Bhaskaracharya, Panini, Patanjali, Pingala, Bharata, these are the gurus, and there are many more who have laid the foundation of the disciplines that we are studying in universities today. And there are many unnamed ones as well. So math, science, philosophy, music, water management, what have you. I mean, go into any discipline, I find that it leads back to some guru in India who has written a treatise on it, who has given concepts on it, fundamental concepts on it. And that's something we need to know, because then, you know, we will know where we came from, and that will give us that motivation to delve deeper into that subject. And just for those who may not know this, Europe did not accept the decimal system that came from India for centuries. It was not like Indians invented zero and the decimal system and it was accepted by the Europeans. It wasn't. Today we take it for granted. It's such a huge discovery, such a huge development that came from India. If we hadn't done it, we would be writing 3898 in the Latin way, right? CCD. They used to invent new letters, new alphabets for every number. So Roman symbols, you know, L stood for 50, C for 100, and the largest number with a symbol was M for myriad, which was 10,000. Okay. So zero and decimals were banned in Florence in 1299. That's on record. The zero and decimal system that went from India to the rest of the world was actually banned because they were seen as pagan systems, pagan. And it took a lot of effort from scholars like Fibonacci, whom we know as Fibonacci. His name was Leonardo Bonacci. In the 13th century, he said we must adopt modus indorum, the method of the Indians or the method of the Hindus, in order to do our calculations. Otherwise, we are going to take endless amount of time to do our calculations. And this picture that you see is a big competition between those who want to do calculations the old way, using the abacus. You know the abacus? Where you move the beads to do the calculations for addition, multiplication. There were the fastest abacus people competing with the fastest computational people who are using the Indian way, the modus indorum, and calculating using paper, okay? And ultimately when these guys started winning all of those, that's when they said, okay, we have to go for the modus indorum method. This is something we should remember, that such original thinking came from India about how to write numbers, that we have not made a single change in it. We are using it as it is even today. And why are we not coming up with such concepts today? We really need to ask. Now in my book, the longest chapter is about how Indian knowledge went to the rest of the world. I think you might have listened to other speakers who came here, like Dr. Raj Vedam and others who have spoken on similar things. Enormous amount of knowledge has gone from India in various ways. Students who came and learned, copied the manuscripts and took back those books with them. Or, you know, our scholars themselves traveling. A lot of Indians, gurus went and settled in China, went to Japan, and they taught, and the funny thing is they taught them in their language. So our gurus used to learn Chinese, live in China, teach them in Chinese. So many books were translated, and they set up Department of Astronomy in China. All this record is there, and I have given the sources in my book. So if you ever get into a debate, you have in the bibliography all the sources, right? Japan. I mean, Japan also, these countries acknowledge that they got this knowledge from India. And also many of our manuscripts are still lying in foreign countries, millions of them. And some of them are in good condition also because the weather there is colder. In Japan, our manuscripts are in very good condition because of the colder weather, whereas here they were perishing very quickly and they needed to be copied again and again. And when that stopped, we lost a lot of that knowledge. So this infographic has been appreciated because people say that this gives a ready reckoner on what knowledge went from India to the rest of the world. So I'll leave you to see it in the book itself. I don't know if I have time to tell. Do I have time? I have a little bit of time. Just an anecdote, just to give you some flavor of the way things were studied in India. Now there was this astronomer called Le Gentil, a French astronomer, and he was following the transit of Venus around the world, and he was traveling and getting all this information. And he wanted to know how Indians calculate eclipses, because remember in those days it was known that Indians are very good in astronomy. It was a known thing that they are very good in calculating astronomical events, the timings of those events. So let's look at their methods and see what we can learn. So this person lived until in the 18th century, because 18th century already, the Europeans have come to India and they know that India has a different kind of educational system. They seem to be quite good with astronomy. And that's how this person landed in India, and he wants to know how the Brahmin people who are good in astronomy, how are they doing the calculations. So he's made him sit on the floor and show how he calculates. And this is such a funny story that I was laughing aloud, because this guy, he has some squares on a board. So he has on the floor some squares on which he's moving around some shells, kauri, they call it kauri. So he chants something, then he moves something, then he chants something, then he moves something, and then within 5 minutes he's giving the what time the eclipse is going to happen. And then this person diligently saying, what the hell, how did you do it, explain it to me. And he said, I'll explain it to you tomorrow and all, and he just vanishes. So he got very angry. He said, okay, doesn't want to share it with me, I'm going to threaten him the next time. He tried various things, but eventually the Brahmin was good enough to teach him that. And then after he learnt it, he said that we cannot calculate this way, because this involves a lot of memory. He's not writing down anything. In those days, Europe already had tables, right? They were referring to tables. So they would get some number from the table, write it, then they'll do some calculation, then they'll write it. And that's how they would do it. But what this Brahmin is doing is that he's going to chant something and then he'll move some squares. And so there is a whole different method of learning here, which is very quick and very accurate. He says that, I don't understand how they are so accurate, because suppose you forget something, then you can't even go back. You can't go back and correct what was wrong and come back, because he says that's how they learned, right? The Europeans had learned it that way. So this is a very interesting interaction I found, and I think this is a pedagogical aspect that we should study. How is it that they were so quick in their calculations and they didn't use a lot of writing? Okay, we have lost some skill over here. Now people ask, okay, we were so great, what happened? Why are we not having that level of knowledge or learning? And this is an inescapable portion of our history which we have to acknowledge, when there was mindless violence unleashed on our universities. Nalanda, Takshashila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, Udantapura, Jagaddala, so many. I mean, Ujjain. And there are heroic accounts of scholars who were preserving our manuscripts. Those stories are very moving. Just as our murtis were being preserved, there are a lot of scholars who carried the manuscripts with them and protected it with their life. They're hanging from the cliffs, holding on to it until they reach a safe kingdom where these manuscripts are kept safely. A lot of these stories which are, when you read these stories, you will feel like you have a responsibility. Whatever knowledge has come down to us today, it is our responsibility to keep it safe, to learn what is in it and to pass it on to the next generation, because a lot of sacrifices have been made. And then after the period of invasions, we had this British imperialism, which was another level of destruction of Indian knowledge systems, because so much of taxation was imposed on us, where we were living hand to mouth because of that. And then all those pathshalas and the gurukulas, which I remember I told you how the society was supporting them, they all died out. It's a very, very sad story, because we went from a period where everybody is supporting the pathshalas and the gurukulas to a period where everybody is fending for himself or herself, that where will my next meal come from? I'm not even going to think about how the teacher is going to live or how the student is going to live. So on the left side, you can see the famines that broke out all over India, and literally people, the pathshalas closed down, okay? And there was all that studies that we had, those innovative ways of teaching, they all vanished. And you will find some of the British themselves have documented how that knowledge was, how those schools were shut down. There's the second bullet point where you see there is this quote from Campbell, where he says, where formerly there were schools, there are now none. And in many others, where there were large schools, now only a few of the children of the most opulent are taught, others being unable from poverty to attend or to pay what is demanded. So in this way, this is how our educational system collapsed. And this is a very significant comment from British India by Ludlow, in which he says that in every Hindu village which has retained its old form, I am assured that the children generally are able to read, write and cipher. Cipher means mathematics calculations. But where we have swept away the village system, as in Bengal, there the village school has also disappeared. It's a very poignant quote. Now I come to today, and I'm talking about why do we need to be rooted in our knowledge systems and our educational heritage. The one big reason I see is that it enables us to see the big picture. One of the things about our Bharatiya Drishti and the Indian knowledge systems when we are educated in the Bharatiya Drishti is that we see the big picture. We see beyond the body, beyond the boundaries, countries. We see connected systems everywhere. That is the Indian way of looking at things. Everything is connected to something else. And that's why I say that when we are rooted in Indian knowledge systems and our Jnana Parampara, our Paddhati, then we see the big picture. Second, the balance that comes. You know, the yoga way of life, it brings greater self-awareness. Almost every Indian knowledge system text that you study or any discipline that you go into is about balance. It's about self-awareness, about knowing yourself better so that you understand the universe better. So it elevates you and it brings balance. Mental health. I also see that when we connect ourselves to our knowledge systems, it is very beneficial to mental health. Because today a lot of problems that we are seeing, anxiety, depression, insomnia, a lot of mental health issues, I feel that it's happening because they've just not been taught the Indian way. They've not been taught the Indian way, which I mean, not the colonized Indian way, but the ancient Indian way. That is responsible for all those stresses and problems. And true diversity. Understanding that different people have different darshanas, different mata, mati se mata aata hai. So what mat do they have, what views do they have, and we can agree to disagree. This is very intrinsic to Indian way of thinking. So diversity is not something that needs a department. If you are actually learning in the Indian way of knowledge transmission, there will be no need of a diversity and inclusion department because it will be there, it's intrinsically understood. And I have another point to make, which is that today's problems, we have a lot of problems today, global problems, climate change, garbage, what you talked about, garbage at the end of the road. I mean, miserable problems that we have today. And when I think about it, it has not come from the Indian way of thinking. It hasn't. And Einstein famously said, you cannot solve problems with the same thinking that was used to create the problems. Global warming was not created with Bharatiya Drishti. Garbage generation has not come from Indian way of thinking because there was no garbage. If you just go back to even 100 years, our grandmothers, how they lived their life, everything that we used was then reused in some other way. So our old clothes will become dusters, will be used for cleaning. They'll be cut into pieces and then they'll be used to cleaning. But even before that, the old clothes will be used by the next generation. The brothers, sisters will pass on their clothes to the next. So it was not like amassing hundreds of things and having, that consumptive lifestyle. It is not the Bharatiya way of doing things. So I feel that if you want to solve today's problems, you cannot solve it by using today's educational system, which is giving you the colonizers' way of thinking. We need to go back to our ancient way, Indian way of thinking, if you want to solve the problem. And to give you one example, hill station holidays versus yatra. Do you know that there was no concept of going on a vacation or a holiday in ancient times? We didn't. Nobody said that, oh, I'm going to Shimla, I'm going to Kashmir for 1 week. It wasn't there. What they did was, they used to go on a yatra. So they would go on a yatra, which is that they would go walk for many, many days. They would reach this beautiful temple. They will stop at different places. There will be dharmshalas where they can stop, they can share food. And then ultimately they go there and they have a fun time and they come back. Today's culture is, I'm going for 2 days and I'm going to be playing golf there, I'm going to do something. And so look at the kind of construction that has come up. There is no, that whole thinking has gone where we were thinking of going on a yatra to a place where nature is sacred. Because you see, nature was sacred. It was not, there was no environmental sciences or environmental engineering which was taught as a discipline. But everybody knew that the rivers are sacred, the mountains are sacred, I am sacred. So with this kind of thinking, it was there in every discipline. So engineers would know that, look, I can't build something that's going to destroy this mountain. Engineers knew that we cannot design a sewage system which is going to pour sewage into this river. That was not the way we lived, because we were so in contact with nature and seeing divinity in nature. So that is how we had what you see on the right side, that place of yatra. That's how our hills and mountains were, versus the left where it's a tourist resort full of hotels, full of people just living there with no understanding of what is the natural vegetation of this place, what are the animals which are intrinsic to this region. They don't give a damn. They just want to have a good time and go back. So this thing cannot be taught by just having environmental engineering as a discipline. You have to rewire the whole mind and make it go and think the Bharatiya way in order to design solutions which are sustainable, which are harmonious, and which are beautiful. Saundarya Drishti, that's another big complaint I have, that we used to know what is Saundarya Drishti, how to make everything look beautiful. Rangolis outside the house, decorating the house, beautiful fragrances. And today you see billboards everywhere. You go to a market and you see hundreds and hundreds of boards. I don't know where to look. In the night they're all like lit up, they're all clashing things. It's just so ugly that you can make out that there is no Saundarya Drishti, which should have been a part of the education. Okay? So I am saying, I am making a case for reconnecting with ancient knowledge to make our life today more meaningful. The classical texts may provide new ideas and solutions for the modern world. I feel there are many gems that are waiting to be discovered in our Shastras. And just to give you a small example, you have this Manjul Bhargava. You might have heard of Manjul Bhargava, who won the highest award in mathematics. It's called the Fields Medal. He won it. And what was his topic? He used ideas from the works of Pingala, Brahmagupta, Hemachandra, Virahanka. All these are ancient mathematicians whose works he came across when he was on spending time with his grandfather in Jaipur. So he just saw his father, his grandfather was reading these Sanskrit books, and he says, teach me, and he taught him some of them. And then he got, much later in life, ideas on how to prove Gauss's law on binary quadratic forms using these principles of the ancient mathematicians. And he said, how did they do it? So they have such short explanations, short proofs. Why can't I do it in an elegant way like them, where it reads beautiful and it's also very short? And that's how he did it, and for that he got the highest award. Okay? So don't bear the impression that what you're studying from ancient texts is of no relevance today. You might just win a Nobel Prize or some award when you go deep into it and try to understand what it is and how it is relevant for today. So Ayurvedic concoctions, then yoga is being repurposed to treat diseases. Then there's potential in agriculture, water management, sanitation, architecture, cooking. There are lots of shastras on cooking, how to cook. And there also you will find a lot of interesting things that might be relevant for today. Textiles, art, entertainment. Natya Shastra, for example, will give you very, very new ideas on what is entertainment and how you should actually bring out the rasas, how you should evoke a certain rasa in the listener. You're not just here to dance and go away, make some movie which will leave you with some feelings which are very destructive. There is a way of making a movie in which a certain rasa has to be evoked in the listeners. So all these shastras, whatever shastras you're hearing of, if you want to explore, you can do it, because today learning Sanskrit has been made a lot more easier. You can learn it online. I am myself learning Sanskrit, and I'm learning Nyaya Shastra, and I'm thinking, why are not the others also trying to do the same? It's so relevant. I use it in my everyday language, and I'm happier because I'm using all these texts. Of course, I haven't gone into all the texts, but I'm going into a couple of them, and it's already made my life more meaningful. A quick point I want to make is that today the Western world is giving us terminology, right? We have, a quick example is one water. When I was in the water sector, I was given this terminology called one water approach. One water means because this same water that we are human beings are consuming, animals are also using this water, birds are also using this water, nature also needs this water. So we should think of water in an integrated way. And I was thinking, what's new about this? That is exactly how our sages used to think, that we are all one, we are all connected. So what is new about saying this one water is for everybody? And I actually asked this question, and I had a lot of debate with during the World Water Forum. And then I put forward the Indian way of thinking, which was, so we basically need to go back to the Indian way of thinking, which is one water, one health. One health is another concept, by the way, which is very popular today, that our health is connected to the animal's health is connected to the plant health. Again, it's the same thing. It's our way of looking at the Brahmanda, right? So I think when we go and look at the text ourselves, read it in the original, then we can give terminology to the world. Instead of being just bland recipients of these terminologies, like, alternate nostril breathing. Pranayama is now being repurposed as alternate nostril breathing. They don't want to say pranayama. And the most ridiculous one I heard was non-sleep deep rest. Non-sleep deep rest, which was being pushed forward, I'm afraid, by a very well-known IITian himself, that the way he gets good sleep is by doing non-sleep deep rest. And when I went and investigated, it was nothing but yoga nidra. Yoga Nidra is a fantastic way which our yogis gave to the world of how to go into a restful state without actually sleeping. And in that state, you're able to get into a state where your very new ideas will come to you. You'll be able to look at the world in a very different way. So it's a power nap, but with a difference, where you are opening up your mind. So Yoga Nidra, and now of course the Western world has appropriated it and it's coming, it's been patented, it's now non-sleep deep rest. And there is a sankalpa, they make a sankalpa in that state of Nidra, where whatever you want to do and accomplish in life, you make it a part of your inner being by making the sankalpa. So this is something that can be learnt from a yoga guru. Okay, so again something that India can give to the world even today if you go and learn from the original text. We need to use our own frameworks, like Chaturashrama, Triguna, Purushartha, Karma theory, Pancha Mahayagya. These are concepts which we may not know right now. Go and look into these concepts and see what they mean and look at the world through these concepts and the world will open up to you. So there's a lot that we can mine in terminology and give that terminology to the world if we become familiar with them. Otherwise, it will be served to you. Some great researcher from the West will come to you and give it to you and you will be taught that this is a magnificent concept and you won't even know it came from your own culture. Okay? So being rooted is necessary to avoid being erased. So we have to be rooted in our educational tradition in order that we are not erased. So we're not like forgotten. So today, for example, in the global discourse, everything is, they try to make it go back to the Greeks. So whether, Pythagoras, Democritus, Aristotle and all that, but when you go and look into it, long before Aristotle, long before Socrates, you'll find that similar things are being talked about in India. I'm not saying that have a big clash of civilizations, but just be aware of who you are, be rooted so that you can talk about these terminologies and concepts that our rishis gave to the world, and then you stand from that position of confidence. So here's a thought. Could the disconnect from Indian knowledge be preventing us from discovering the next miracle drug or mathematical concept or some subtle understanding of the working of the universe? So this is something that we need to think about. That's a thought that I would like to leave you with. And in my journey now, after I've written my books on India's educational heritage, India's Paddhati, Jnana Parampara and Paddhati of teaching, I've been traveling to the Gurukulas. I've been traveling to so many Gurukulas to see whether there are those pedagogical concepts which are still being followed and that are relevant. And I've come up with a lot of wonderful things which I hope I'll be able to record in my next book. Even in this journey, I've been to Anadi Gurukula in Tamil Nadu. I also went to the Isha Gurukulam started by the Sadguru. And in my further journeys also, I'm going to many others. And I'm seeing a whole world of difference in the students who are studying in the Gurukulas versus those in the mainstream education. So mainstream education, I'm seeing, yes, they know a lot of facts, a lot of things. But what I'm seeing in the Gurukula is out-of-the-box thinking. A very quick grasp of things, which I hope that someday we will be able to substantiate through research findings. I'm finding a very quick grasping of new topics in the Gurukula children. So this is something I hope that in the years to come I'll look more into it. These are some pictures of the Gurukulas that I visited. You can see here, this is an astronomy class going on there, sitting in the midst of nature, and these girls are effortlessly able to calculate things and give answers, explain concepts. All this was happening over here. That is the Guru. This is Vidyaranya Gurukula in Telangana, where they were having a chess tournament on the day I visited them. And this is where they are learning agriculture. So there is one Gurukula where every morning there is 1 hour of agriculture. All the students and teachers and everybody have to compulsorily do agriculture. So they all know about how to grow their own crops that they eat. So these are the things that I'm finding. Then I hope I'll come back to this place again to tell you, to share more. For those who are interested in my book, here are some details and my social media profiles, and the book is also available here. So thank you very much for listening to me patiently.